Welcome to JasonWhiskyWise. My name is Jason. Welcome to this whiskey review here on the channel, where today we're going to be starting a new series into some whiskies from England. And it's actually the first time we're going to be bringing you English whiskies or English single malts here to the channel. And we're going to be exploring them with the Lakes Distillery. So I've actually got 9 expressions to get through, of which I believe 4 are single malts and 5 are blends. So we'll start off with the single malt series from them, which are the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve. They've got 4 expressions in that range, and then I'll move into the Lakes Whiskymakers edition, where they've got 1 release so far, and then I'll move into the blended series from the Lakes Distillery, which is the 1 series, where they use, it's got different blends. It's where they use the Lake single malt, but they also blend it together with Scottish malts and grains, and they use very interesting casks, like an orange wine cask, which I'm really excited to bring you guys here, because that one, I never heard of it before, and then when I tried the liquid, I was quite surprised. So you'll see that coming up here on the channel. So first off, we're going to start off with the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1. Now, this was the first release in the Whiskymakers Reserve series, and that series is where the whiskey maker himself, Dhaval Gandhi, goes out and is trying to define a house style for the Lakes Distillery with the use of different casks and the art of blending to create their single malt, define their house style. So for me, this is a very interesting one. I was actually sent this sample over here. I'll show you guys up on screen. I was sent this one back in 2019. And yeah, sadly, I haven't had very much time to review this one. But I got around to doing some tasting notes. I just wanted to make sure everything is put into a video so it's more easier and accessible, because I've written my tasting notes already. But instead of putting them on a blog or anything, it's best to present them here on YouTube. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this whiskey. In terms of my review style structure, this one here is a no age statement whiskey. The ABV on this one is 60.6%. It is quite a powerhouse. In terms of the cask maturation for this one, it's matured in a combination of PX, and I think it's the other one is red wine cask. So they marry the two together, and that gives you the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1. In terms of the distillery itself, it is the Lakes Distillery, and fingers crossed at some point soon in the future, we'll actually go and visit them at the Lakes Distillery. And in terms of where they're located in the Lake District here in England. So actually a little bit up north. I think it's about a 3 or 4 hour train ride for me. But as soon as it's possible to travel, I'd like to go and visit them, take you all with me, and do like a little tour of the distillery, and also maybe have a chance to interview their whiskey maker himself, Dhaval Gandhi. And it'd be kind of cool. Put your questions to the master whiskey maker and have like a little just general chat in itself. So the price point on a full-size bottle of this one was £65 at release. Sadly, now it's been 2 years, so it's pretty much long gone, but you can find it on the secondary market. And if you do find it in a shop, still at about that 60 to maybe even £100, highly suggest just picking up a bottle, because it is the first release in their range, and it's something rather special to have a first release from a distillery. Now, in terms of exclusivity, I believe this one is definitely exclusive, because I think the most recent one didn't have bottle numbers, but this one was limited to 5,922 bottles. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself on screen, but I think it was 5,922 bottles that were only made for the first Whiskymakers Reserve. So without further ado, let's dive straight into the tasting notes on this one. Let's find what we can on the nose, into the nose. So to begin things out on the nose for the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1, first note that comes to mind as soon as I put my nose to this glass is a raspberry ripple ice cream. It just reminds me of a raspberry ripple ice cream in the summer with extra raspberry syrup just over the top. It just really those red fruits are coming to the nose. And these are actually more red berries. So these red berries continue. I'm getting dehydrated cranberries, goji berries, and even a bit of red currants, but tangy red currants. Behind that there is a slight little nutty aspect. And for me, this is like white almonds, but probably pushing towards almond butter. And there's a creaminess on the nose. It reminds me of, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the brand name, but there's a fast food chain that does a vanilla milkshake, and it's like super creamy. It just reminds me of that creamy vanilla milkshake. And if you guys can hear humming in the background, it's because one of my neighbors, or 2 of my neighbors, are cutting their grass, so the lawnmowers are literally just making a little buzz in the background. I've disturbed the video. I've already filmed this one a couple times. But sadly, it's summer. What can I really do? So, carrying back onto this one though, there is that little bit of that vanilla milkshake, but following from there is a sweeter note underneath. And the sweeter note to me reminds me of almost, I don't know if it's like toffee. yeah, probably it's like toasted toffee, almost like if you've burnt toffee to a certain aspect, that little bit of a whiff of smoke, but at the same time, the sweetness is much more over the top of that, but ever so gentle. But those red currants, red berries, raspberries all come to the forefront of the nose in this one. Beautiful nose. Let's see what we have in store for the palate. Sláinte. So my first impressions on the palate for this whiskey, we'll start with the texture. Texture for me, this has got a nice medium full texture to it. It's got a nice mouth coating texture, which is really nice. But behind that, you do get to the forefront of this one, and to the tip of your tongue, you are getting a lot of spices. And for me, these are not overwhelming, but they are, maybe because it's the ABV, you can add water, but you still get that spicier aspect. For me, these are wood spices. These are cinnamon, red pepper, sweet clove, all playing on the forefront of the palate. Behind that though, this is where those red fruits come back, and now it's not red berries so much. To me, it's more dominant in red plums. Reminds me if you're having red plums, the red plum skin with a little bit of a tarty character, dried apple, and then there is a drying character through the center of the palate. And for me, this is like if you just had cranberry juice and you sometimes feel like, you know, your tongue feels almost leathery, where it's sunk into your taste buds, that characteristic of dryness on the center of the palate. So overall, really nice, but a little bit of, I don't know, it's difficult to describe that spiciness. I just wish it was a bit more milder. However, let's just see what we have in the finish, and I'll come to my concluding notes on this Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1. Here's the finish. So finally, to conclude the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1, in terms of my overall opinion on the finish for this whiskey, the length in the finish is not super long, but neither is it short. I'd say it's got a nice medium length of the finish. And in terms of flavor profiles on the finish, this one, you do get a slight buttery biscuit, almost like shortbread. And then it's followed up with the red fruit, and this time it's more like strawberries. It reminds me actually of the strawberry syrup or strawberry cordial. And then there's like vanilla. For me, it's custard creams, the actual biscuit, and then the creamy bit inside. And then there's a slight bitterness that rolls off the back into the front of the palate, which I can't quite place, but is ever so slightly bitter as it dries the center of the palate. But overall, a very pleasant dram. And in terms of my score for this one, I've already decided I'm going to give this one here an 87 out of 100. If that does stay, fingers crossed it does. If it doesn't, nope, it's going to fall. Anyway, 87 out of 100 for this whiskey. In terms of money value, do I think it's worth £65? Yes, I do. But I would highly recommend, you know, if you find this at retail price, 65 up to £100, I think is very reasonable for this whiskey. In terms of, does it need water, does it need time? The aspect of water I would highly suggest. It just brings down that spice a little bit. And in terms of time, do give this one time. When I first opened this one, it was a bit of a blast where it had, you know, a lot more strength. But over time, it did mellow it out, and those red fruits then come a bit more present on this dram. Beautiful whiskey. I just feel that spicy aspect just needs to be toned down ever so slightly. But we'll see what the other Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve have, because we've got number 3 and number 4. I don't think I've got number 2. Well, actually, no, I know I don't have number 2 because that was one I missed. I think that was at Whiskey Show 2019. I tried it at the stand with the whiskey maker himself, Darvel Gandhi. So fingers crossed, we'll see if we can get a sample of that and cover it here on the channel. It's been 87 out of 100 for the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Have you tried any of the Lakes whiskies? Let me know in the comment section. And what do you think of the Lakes Whiskymakers Reserve No.1? This has been me, JasonWhiskyWise. If you have enjoyed the video, drop it a thumbs up. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, which I'll leave over there. And I'll leave some other Lakes whiskey videos reviews here for when I upload them, so you can have a little playlist to check them all out. So this has been me, JasonWhiskyWise. I'll catch you all for the next video. Sláinte.